Yeah, we're live. That's it. That's all I got. Everything else is up to you guys. 7:28, and tonight we're going to talk about changing static compression. There's more to it. There's more to a head swap than that. And talking about, first of all, we'll start off at the beginning. So the beginning is, Richard, how do I get more torque out of my 6-liter? Well, one of the tried and true methods for a 6-liter is to, guys have been doing this for years, take 317 heads off it, big combustion chambers, bigger ports, bigger valves. Take those off, and the low buck way to do it is to get a set of 706 or 862 heads from the wrecking yard, from a 4.8 or 5.3. Just go to any wrecking yard. There'll be about a bajillion of them there. You'll be hard pressed to find a 6-liter. You might. I've actually had better luck finding them, but you'll find lots of the 4.8s and 5.3s. Take those heads off, put them on your 6-liter. We already know that that's going to be 20 or 25 horsepower. And it's going to be that for a couple of reasons. Guys will tell you, oh, it's all static compression. And it is some of that. But it's also because you have smaller ports and smaller valves and a smaller chamber. It's all that stuff. And I've done that test. I have videos up on what happens when we run a 706 head, a 317 head, a 799 head, and even a 241 head, which is the head that they use on the 5.7 LS1s. And you can see all that. And I did that test on a 5.3 and then also did it on a 6-liter. I'm not sure that I don't think I did. I might not have done the 317s on the 6-liter. It's been a long time since we did that stuff. I can't remember. I have run the 317s on a 6-liter. I just don't remember if that was part of that test. But at any rate, I did another test though, where we ran a 6-liter and we ran 317s on it. We took those off and put the 706 heads, and it does help the power output quite a bit. We know that because we've seen that. And so it's a really good way to get more, because guys are looking for low speed power. They're looking for 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 RPM. And that's in a range, 4,000 you could get some, but that's in a range where camshafts don't do a whole bunch compared to the factory cam. Because the factory cam is small, it's fairly good way down low. And when we see gains from camshafts, we get, good gains, out past 4,000, out past 4,500. But it's harder to get gains down low there. The low buck truck cam does add quite a bit of torque there. So if you guys are interested, go to richardholdnerperformance.com, and we have cams on sale right now, so you guys can take a look at those. But even as good as that camshaft is, and there's other choices too, BTR Truck Norris, Chupacabra, any of these stage 1 kinds of truck cams, all of those have the potential to do fairly well. But they just don't add power way down low. And the nice thing about adding a 706 or an 862 head and replacing the 317 head on a 6-liter is that you get more torque everywhere. So it's a gain basically across the board, including way down low, including off idle. So it'll be snappier no matter what. The potential downside to this is when you do that, there's one of the reasons that you're getting that is because we have a change in compression. Now, the change in compression is going to help power output at a rate of about 3 to 4% per 1 full point of compression. So if we change the compression from 8 to 9, we can change the power output by 3 or 4%. So on a 300 horsepower motor, we're looking 9 to 12 horsepower gain when we go from 8 to 1 to 9 to 1. It's pretty easy to understand. Same thing going from 9 to 1 to 10 to 1, 10 to 1, 11 to 1. You don't get extra gains from the, because you started out higher, and then you're just changing it by a certain percentage. And that's what compression does. And it changes it at 2,000 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and everywhere that you're testing it. It changes it like a railroad track, just everywhere. So that's what compression does. But the question is, how much are we changing it? How much do we change it when we go from a 706 head to a 317 head? Well, you need to step into Mr. Wizard's laboratory, and I'm going to show you time and time again. People ask me that question. People ask on the live feed. People ask me in the comments and stuff. And the way to find out is not to ask me. I can tell you what it is, but rather than giving you the fish, let me just teach you how to fish. I'll give you a pole and stuff and teach you how to fish. So everybody that's watching, everybody on the live feed, go with me right now over to Wallace Racing, go in your search bar, search for Wallace Racing compression calculator, and go over to Wallace Racing. And if you do a search for Wallace Racing compression calculator, I'm going to show you how to put in the numbers. I can't show it on my screen, unfortunately. I'm not clever enough to do that. But you guys can all stick along with me, and I'll be here on camera when you do it. But if we go over to Wallace Racing compression calculator, I'm going to show you what happens when we change from 706 heads to when we put 706 heads in place of 317 heads. So if you go to Wallace Racing compression calculator, you'll see something that comes up that says compression calculator and says start. He specialized in Pontiac engines, so he's got a bunch of cool Pontiac things just to choose from, and you could pick one of those: a 301, a 326, 350, 389, 400, 421, 428, and 455. We're not doing a Pontiac, so we can't just select one of those, which is easy. But on the other side of that, you see number of cylinders, 8. That's what we're starting with. You could do this on a 6-cylinder because it's the amount of compression that you get from these changes is different with a different number of cylinders. But we select our bore. So we know on a 6-liter, it's a 4-inch bore. Lucky for me, I've already had one of those as part of the drop-down menu. The stroke on a 6-liter is 3622. Same stroke as a 5.3, same stroke as a 6.2. So we have a 4-inch bore and a 3622. The next one is the chamber size. So we're going to start off by putting the 317 chamber size in there. And I'm going to say 71 cc's because this is going to make our math easy. You can put in exactly what that is. If it's 72 or 69 or whatever it is, put in the number. I'm going to put in 71 because that's a pretty good. I've tested lots of them, and the last one I tested, that's what it was. So we're going to put in 71 cc. So it's asking you what the displacement is and what the chamber size is, because we're going to have to see what the swept volume is. So now it asks you valve relief or domes. So 6.6 cc's, it has that in there already. That would basically be a typical flat top piston with valve relief. That's their default thing. That's what they're going to. I think, and you guys can let me know, I think that the dome volume or the dish volume in an LQ4, let's say, we could do this with an LQ9 too that has a flat top, that has no dome on it and no valve relief. We could just leave it at 0 and then it would be an LQ9. But I'm going to put 10 in there, and you don't put a negative number in there when it's a dish. You put a negative number in there when it's a dome value. When it's a dome. So a negative number is a dome. So if we put a 10 in there, it's going to be a dish, a 10 cc dish, which is what I think that the LQ4 is. Somebody let me know if that's not the case, but it really doesn't matter because that's going to stay consistent for our comparison. We'll just make sure that when we put in the numbers, we'll put these numbers in for the 317 head, then we'll put the numbers in for the 706 head, and all of them will be the same except for the chamber size. So we're putting in 10 cc's there. Gasket thickness, right now, the default is 041. I'm going to put 53 because that's probably closer to a factory head gasket thickness, a compressed thickness. Gasket bore diameter, when I do it, I put 4100 in it. It's probably not that big. We could put 4060, but it's probably, it doesn't matter. As long as it's the same. So we're going to put 10 and 4.06. Again, somebody can let me know. For calculating the compression change, if you're only changing one variable, that's not that critical. It's just critical that it's the same for both of them. And then the deck height, a lot of times LS stuff is out of the hole. Sometimes it's at 0 deck. I haven't found any that are below deck. But again, for us, I'm going to leave this at 0 because you don't have to put anything in there. Unless you measured your deck height and you're trying to find out exactly what it is, you need some detailed information. But for our comparison, doing 706 versus 317 heads, I'm just going to assume the piston's at 0 deck. It may not be. Usually they're a little bit out, but it's fine. And then are there any other additions that you're putting in there? No. So we have number of cylinders, 8. Bore, 4-inch. Stroke, 3622. Chamber size, 71. Dome or valve relief value, 10 cc's. Gasket thickness, 053. Gasket bore size, 4.06. And 0 decking this thing. So let's find out what our static compression is on our 6-liter with those values. Oh my gosh, what happened? Oh, holy moly. Okay, I have to do this again. 4-inch stroke, 3.622, 61, 10, 53, 4.06. Okay, and then right at the bottom below other additions, there's something that says calculate compression ratio. And you just click on that. Once we click on that, it tells us our static compression of our 364-inch motor, because it gives you displacement too, is 9.09. That's with the 317 head. Okay, so now let's do the same thing with our 706 heads. We'll put in our bore, 4-inch, put in our stroke, at 3622, put in our chamber size, and in this case, on the 706 heads, we're going to put 61. I've seen some be a little smaller than that, but let's change it. This way, we're changing it by 10 cc's. So let's find out what a 10 cc change in combustion chamber actually equates to. So we go back down to we put 61 cc head chamber. We go down to our valve relief, our dome size, and we're going to put 10 in there because we have the same dish. Our gasket thickness, what are we putting in there? 053. Gasket bore size, 406. Deck height is at 0. So all we've done is gone from a 71 cc combustion chamber to a 61 cc combustion chamber. So we've changed our 317 heads to 706 heads. Now we need to calculate our compression, and voila, we get 10.07. 10.07 with a 706 head. So what we've done here, and I'll go back to our live stream, what we've done here is we've changed the combustion chamber 10 cc's, and we got almost exactly 1 full point of compression. So when you take a 706 head, take the 317 head off of your 6-liter, put a 706 head, you will change the static compression by 1 full point. It's really simple. And guys are now asking, well, Richard, what if we started with an LQ9? It's the same. You're just going to start out higher, probably around 10, and then you're going to get to 11 because you're going to change it still by 1 full point. So it's quite a bit. You can see on a flat top 6-liter, you're starting to get into having some serious compression. We are going to have another discussion about this, about how we would go about and how Richard Holder Performance might have something to allow you to install these heads and not have to worry about detonation. I'm sure guys are going to be interested in that, but that's down the line a little bit. But we will be having that conversation, so it will be awesome. But I've just walked you through on how I've shown you where to go. Wallace Racing, I use it all the time for displacement calculators, for compression calculators, all the time. We do it on everything just to see what changes are, and also to find out exactly what things are. If we know exactly if we've CC'd the head, if we found out how far the piston is up or down out of the hole, or if it's at 0 deck, if we found out specifically all the information and the dome or dish volume on the piston, we can plug that in, and they have that tool online, and it's fantastic. I mean, like I said, once you go there, you'll want to go there all the time, because then you'll start going, well, what if I did this? What if I did this? What if I did this? And it's, that's really kind of a slice of awesomeness. So let's see. We'll start our poll. In the future, will you be using Wallace Racing compression or displacement calculator in the future? Now that I've shown you how easy it is and how awesome it is, will you now be using that of your own volition? So let's scroll back here. Eric, what's going on? Knowledge. James. I can see the Castech logo on the 706 in the thumbnail. What you can actually see if you look very closely is you could see the total engine airflow machined logo that they put in there, because that was actually a set of ported heads that I had, which are awesome. Have 706s on my LQ4 with boost. All of that works. More compression and more port velocity equals more torque. Okay. I bought a 6.2. That's another way to add torque. If you have a 6-liter and you put a 6.2 on, that's going to be more torque. Have about the 799 heads on Gen 6 6-liter will also be an upgrade. A 799 head will definitely be an upgrade over a 317 head. And as we've shown on the comparison between a 799 head and a 706 head, the 706 head made more power when we tested it on a fairly healthy cammed 6-liter. The 706 head made more power up to about 5,000. And then the 799 head actually made a little more power at the peak. So that video is up if you want to check it out. Came from a Cadillac 6.2. That's a good one. It's an all aluminum motor then, right? Danny, what's going on? You haven't been here forever. Richard, can you discuss what the changes would be on a 6-liter LQ4? I'm head swapping as we speak for the best 1,000 horsepower street build heavyweight Denali. Tomlinson, you can make 1,000 horsepower with any of the stock heads and the right turbo. You just do a cam and springs, big injectors, and you can easily make 1,000 horsepower. Either one of the cams that I have for sale right now up on my store at richardholderperformance.com, you can easily make 1,000 horsepower with. So really the thing that's going to make that is not the cylinder head, and my cams aren't magic. There's lots of other cam choices out there. So it's not the cam, it's not the cylinder head, it's the turbo. You need 1,000 horsepower turbo, and you put that other stuff on, boom, you made 1,000 horsepower. Neil, what's going on in the land of dragons? How long ago was it they saw their last dragon there? I have 823s on my 215 6-liter. I don't know about you, what you mean by thoughts. Man, you lost me there. But I have run turbos on lots of rec port heads, if that's your question. Made the live. Yo, what's going on? Going back under the hood because rain's coming tomorrow. There you go. With the Truck Norris. Truck Norris is good. I like the BTR stuff. I like Brian. He's family. He's good people. I'm just finishing the 6-liter with ported 706s. We've made lots of power with ported 706s. We've had ported 706s that flow over 300 CFM. So you can make really good power with those. Going to tune it, stuff it on chassis dyno. It should be fun. In a 1980 VED, it'll be a huge change from what was in there. Got a video from Lake Speed yesterday. Made me realize I don't think I gapped my oil rings. Would you recommend disassembly for that? Elm 7, forged pistons, rods, 25 pounds of boost street. No. Do you have any idea what the gap was when you put them in? Normally you have most people I never gap oil rings. So I don't know what Lake was doing. But when you're looking at the oil rings, if you look at those, the manufacturers all specify a minimum of 15 thousandths, and I've never seen any that aren't at least 15 thousandths. But it's a good idea to look at them and find out. Low end gains is what it's all about for us truck guys. We need all the low end 2,000, 4,000. Then this is, I would argue that this 706 head upgrade in place of the 317s is the best thing that you could do for that range. Put long tube headers on it, obviously a tune, and then a Richard Holder Performance low buck truck cam, and you're on your way. I'd like to learn how to make 317 perform as well or outperform the 706 heads. You won't do that. They won't make the same power, particularly on an NA motor, unless you get to the point where the better flow on the 706 or on the 317 heads would overcome that. And we had a live feed about that, and it would be really hard to do. I mean, you're trying to make up a deficit of 20 or 25 horsepower. So you can mill the 317s. Obviously, that would change it. If you go from a 71 to I don't know how much you could mill it. And I would start to be worried about, because you can mill them 30, and beyond that, you start worrying about, does the head actually bolt onto the head? Because when you're doing that, when you're lowering that down, it changes where those bolt holes are relative to the intake manifold. So that becomes problematic. But you could mill that, and you know, if you were doing it and weren't doing the same thing to the 706 head, you could mill those. You could put a thinner head gasket on and a smaller bore head gasket, depending on what was before. you could do all that to try to, make more static compression. But ported 317s flow really well. We had ported 317s on the Big Bang 6-liter that made 1,500 horsepower. So they will make a lot of power. With the right turbo, you just turn the boost up. Everything's good. A stock bottom end LQ4 706 heads, 2-inch intake valves. Do you think they will flow similar to a 799 head? Yes, it depends on what one of the sets that we tested that one of the viewers here did. He did a 2-inch valve version, and they flowed really well. I need to see how they flowed versus the 799s to see exactly. But it's not just a bigger valve. They're also going to have to cut the valve seat and probably the bowl area too to transition that, because that bowl area and the valve seat are designed for the smaller valve. So if you did that stuff, you should be able to get lots of flow. And we know that ported versions of those heads with bigger valves in them, because all the ones that we've tested have bigger valves in them too, they can, like I said, you can go way over 300 CFM. Keep the 99s or 243s. Richard is talking about the average of 706s over 317s. If you already have 799s or rec parts, you should keep them. Yeah, all of those are good choices. I use a dynamic compression calculator all the time. Yep, that's also good. Richard, off topic, but have you thought about doing LS blower cam shootout like you did with a turbo cam? LSA guys might benefit from it. Yeah, but honestly, I wouldn't recommend a blower cam for those, because a lot of times what guys want is not what a blower cam does, particularly with that blower. A buddy of mine had a 76 crop duster with a 641 Ironhead Magnum. Okay. So the cam, my new project is 268, 272 at 50, 366 small block Chevy, 12.5 to 1, 72cc 441 heads. What octane should I be running? You're going to need a lot. Well, you won't need a lot with a cam that's that big, probably. But the heads would be the problem that I would see, because if those are 12.5 to 1, and that's a 336-inch small block, that's going to be a really big dome in that thing, especially if you have a 72cc chamber. Why do you have those heads on there? Winston, I don't know what you're talking about. Every day at 6 minutes, I get an ad. Do the Vortec Max come with 706s? What size motor is it? If it's a 6-liter, it doesn't come with 706s. A 5.3 could. But Vortec Max, if it's a high output version of that, might also come with 243s or 799s. Love this calculator. I've been using it for years. My favorite game ever was made by HR Drag Racing 3 because they were so many PIDs you could modify. Richard, have you thought about adding turbo LS combinations to your store? As far as what combinations produce what? Not, you mean just information, or are you talking about packages that do a certain thing? How can you mill off LS heads before you have intake manifold fit? How much? Usually about 30 is as far as people go. BNR. One of the things I love doing in this game was building an NA engine and building a blower engine, and then comparing the performance gains and losses from small tube to large tube headers. That's good stuff. According to this calculator, my LQ4 is 706 and Summit flat tops is 10.7. What size are you putting in for the gasket thickness and the gasket bore diameter? And then where is your piston? Is it out of the hole? What did you do there? Building a 5.3 flat top piston, Chopacabra cam. Is it worth it to port the 706 heads? Who are you having port it? Ported heads will definitely help. What intake manifold do you have? Do you know Joe at Joe Performance or Performance by Joe? I don't. Loving the one on the street is scary for pump gas. Let's run 93. Are you talking about an LS? I'm scrolling back. I'm scrolling. Man, I went too far. Oh, there we go. Milled 40 off my 862s. Intake sealing is iffy. Yeah, that's I don't like to go into the areas where it becomes problematic. I would rather just stay in the safe zone and that maybe work on something else. Are there any upgrades I can do to my stock 853 heads that came with my LS1 Camaro engine versus buying aftermarket? Same question for 317s. Yeah, either of those heads can be ported, and either of those heads can be milled. So they respond the same way as any other head. If you have too much compression like my motorcycle, it's bad. 11 to 1 should be doable LS pump gas unless you're using tighter LSA or low centerline angle. Yeah, you can certainly do that. I mean, you can run more than that static depending on what your the camshaft that you're using is. Brian ran over 12 to 1 on his 454 stroker that he did. It had a pretty good size cam in it, though. Another compression ratio is to run a 40 head gasket. Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, that's one of the parameters that you put in the Wallace Racing stuff. I try to run E85 when I can. I love to add some things like flat or dish valves to this calculator. Yep. You can do that simply by just changing the combustion chamber size. If you know what the change is for the valve change, then you just change the combustion chamber size. If it's 1 cc, then you change it by 1 cc, going from a flat face valve to a dish valve. A flat face valve might be a lot heavier too. This thing is calculated, my wallet will be empty. It does that a lot. I want to ask you about the 8.1 that I just picked up. Did you have any piston to valve clearance issues with the ZZ502 cam? No. Like diamond piston compression ratio calculator, but Wallace Racing is faster. I voted yes, but I use Omni calculator. It gives more data. Okay. That's great information. I'm playing catch up on LS Tech. What kind of numbers would low buck truck or truck plus make on an LM7? A low buck truck is going to be about 425, 415 to 425 probably. The camshaft adds about 60 horsepower, and the truck plus adds more than that. Adds 75. Is it worth it to cam a 5.3 with almost 250,000 miles? If I do all seals, rocker, roller, springs, rods. Are you talking about push rods in there? We don't change any of that stuff. We do change spring because but we have cam and spring kits. But yes, the 250,000 mile motors are the ones that I go for in the wrecking yards. And I wouldn't have any problem putting a cam in mine. It has 350. Add things like deep, shallow, 3.5 angle. If you want to live, put guides and good valves and valve job. When are we going to see some testing on the L8T? I think the handicap for the L8T is are the rod sizes for really high boost stuff. 10 to 1 on 87 octane. No heavy loads or high revs, but with aluminum heads and good quench, is it safe on a cast piston? Yeah, and revs have nothing to do with the octane. You'll be fine. You're way less likely to detonate the thing at higher engine speeds than at lower engine speeds. Your detonation is going to occur at the highest cylinder pressure, and that's going to be at the torque peak. So that's where the area is going to be. That's going to be problematic. It's not going to be at the horsepower peak, but heavy loads can certainly cause more detonation. With aluminum head, you're better off. If you can do things to reduce detonation, that's also good. Engine Masters made 628 horsepower on a Buick. For a junkyard LS swap, how far would I take the motor apart in a build? Would you take it to the block and have a machine, or just take the heads off and replace the seals? It depends on what you're doing. Are you changing the heads? Because if it's a running motor, I just do the cam and springs, and then I run it. I mean, I just run it the way that it came from the wrecking yard, make sure that it's okay, and then do a cam and springs and other things. Like the short block that I have on the L33 is the way it came from the wrecking yard. So nothing's been done to it. What's your opinion on decapped injectors? You won't be able to decap 8 of them and have them work, because they're not going to flow the same when you decap them. They're going to have big flow variances all over. And so what guys that do decap them is they do a whole bunch of them, and then they select the ones that are the same. And then you get 8 good ones out of 12 or 16 other ones that flow. And the other ones might be another group that are flow the same, but maybe those flow 5% less or 10% more or whatever than the other ones. But you want them all flowing as close as you can to the same. And I've never seen anybody nail it by just doing 8 of them. For my LQ9, I've got a set of LS4 243 heads. Okay, those are good heads. They look to be milled. No idea how much. Is there a ballpark minimum amount of machine shop cuts heads before we build? Well, you might do just a skim cut just to make it flat. And if you can make it flat or at 1 or 2 thousandths, they would just do that. It doesn't necessarily have to be milled. It, just like a light surface. Just kissed it. 4 days it was spotted near Orm in whatever. I don't know where that is. What did you see, Neil? Right headers are important. Yep. Porting the 706 says worth it. Yes, you can make more power with ported heads as long as they're properly ported. Who uses BorgWarner MatchBot turbo calculator? It's amazing. It is amazing. It's good stuff. Steve Morse tonight showed a comparison of a SML LS-based billet dry deck cylinder head versus SMX big block Chevy. Cool. How far can you mill the head so you run into coolant journals? That's not going to be the issue. What's the difference between a 706 and 862? There's nothing different about them in terms of performance, but they're different castings. And so people like the casting better on the 862 than they like the 706. Which of the 862 or 706 heads were more known for leaking? I believe there's something about the Castech heads. The 706 heads are supposed to be the problematic ones. I still like measuring volume with a chemist burette. That's the way to do it. I don't know if you can. I don't know if we are sophisticated enough to digitize that and have the little scanner go over it and tell us what it is. But every combustion chamber I've ever measured has been that way. I use grease. We use the little plastic thing with a hole in it, put grease on it, seal that thing down. So we use alcohol. None of that leaks out. And then you put the thing over it and turn it and see how far it goes down. And goes, oh yeah, that one's 67 cc's. 799 or 243, those are the same. What size injector is good for an LQ4 stage 3 comp cam and 706 heads? We have injectors on sale right now. We have like 50s, 70s, and 80s or something. So any of those will be more than enough for an NA motor. People actually need an online calculator for engine displacement. Well, this compression calculator tells you what the displacement is too, but he also has a displacement calculator. It's very easy to plug that stuff in. The demo tonight really put into perspective what the 60cc forged JE pistons would do to my compression. Yeah, you can see and you can play with all that. Okay, what is a big dome versus a big dish piston? What is that going to change it? And it can be a lot. And other things like how much guys want to know. Well, what happens if I put, like on the 6 liter, we ran LS9 head gaskets on it. the Big Bang motor. And that bore size is quite a bit bigger than the 6-liter was. And people ask about that all the time. And you look at big blocks, it's very common because a lot of the combustion chambers for big block aftermarket heads are much bigger than the bore size is. And so the gasket has to be that size to seal. So you have 400 or 500 like bore gaskets on a 4,250 bore block. And so that's extra volume and it lowers the compression. I think I'll have detonation issues with a 436 liter with 243s and an Elgin cam and 11-to-1 compression. How are you getting 11-to-1? Do you have a flat top piston in it or something? And you can minimize detonation with temperature and then timing. What would make more power, a 351 Windsor with heads and cam, stock bottom end, or a 393 stroker with cam but stock head, only springs? I don't know. Depending on how good the heads are that you put on it. A 351 with heads and a cam could make like, I think 460, depending on how crazy you went with the cam and the heads. I'm assuming these both have good intake manifolds on them. But a 393 with stock heads on it is not going to make that. Can a stock LQ9 with stock 243 heads and a cam hit 500 horsepower? Yes. I don't know about that cam, but it can with a good size cam. What size can do we use when we had the 799s on there? Dyno results. Let's go to the dyno results, shall we? Looks like I overshot it. 799 heads, 459 comp cam, which is a 231 cam. That made 522. That was an LY6, so the valve relief piston for the VVT thing. Comp 469 cam, 459 cam. I take that back. 231, 239, 617, 624, 114. And what intake manifold do we have on here? A Dorman LS2, which is the equivalent of a Trailblazer SS. So that one was 520, and it had 1 3/4 or 1 7/8 headers on it. L33 came with 243s. Yeah, a lot of those aluminum HO versions of the 5.3s, the aluminum ones, came with the better heads on them. No brakes on my 99 Gen 6, all iron. Trying to make, let's see. Scroll. Man, where did I go? Okay, here we go. Packages that'll do a certain power. Yeah, we are going to do that. We'll have a turbo and injector and camshaft and springs that we'll have power packages. Can you do a video for an L77 build for NA? I've seen a lot of combos and was curious on what upgrades we offer. L3 intake with stock heads. That motor will respond in the same way that all of the other motors do. So it's a 6-liter, and so is the L77? Where's on all cylinders here? So I'm assuming that that's a rec port headed one, right? A 77. Come on, dude. So it will respond exactly the same as the LY6 or an LS3, which is bigger, but the same kind of thing. I got an L33 bottom end, chopper copper cam, 7/8 headers. I'm putting 706 heads on it. Should be a good little motor. There you go. 209, 217, with an LQ4 on 706 heads. Yeah, that will work if that's your question. Got to know what sorcery you'll be offering to resist high compression detonation. Yeah, I saw lake speed with the other builder videos. Well, I went 029, 035, 040, top oil 015. Okay. Why are there 3 gaps and then a 15 oil? Do you have a 4-ring piston or something? I've angle milled small block Chevy 461 heads to 43 cc's and never milled the intake. You just correct the head and use the thick gasket. Okay. That's never what I would recommend somebody do. So right now, my personal motor of an LR4, 20 mil, 243 heads. Do you have a recommendation for preload on the push rods on LS7 lifter? Yeah, you need to check it and see what the push rod, what the current preload is, how many turns you have, because I have videos up on what it takes. You need somewhere between a half and a turn and a half of preload after you get everything to 0 lash. That will either anywhere in that range will work. Watch another train video tonight. Okay. LQ4 build with sloppy stage 3 home ported polished 706 heads. That will be good if the heads are properly ported. That camshaft will make good power. LS7 forged flat tops. I use LS9 MLS head gaskets. Stock gaskets be okay or better for the street. 1,000 wheel horsepower pump gas. No, I would stick with the LS9 gaskets. That's fine. You should do a test on Engine Quest 364. CNC head seemed like a good head for $800. I think we have tested their as cast heads at West Tech. Water injection. Do you recommend high compression with water injection? Would power increase be worthwhile? The problem I have with running the static compression up so high and then relying on water injection is what happens when your water injection reservoir runs out. That's the only downside to doing that sort of stuff. But water injection, water methanol injection would help that. I just don't like really high compression NA motors. I don't like going into that danger zone. The gains that you get from that do not outweigh all the problems. Why do so many stock tunes force spark, knock, ping like literally 50 plus degrees? All new supercharged trucks spark, knock like crazy, but no one seems to be concerned. I wouldn't have any detonation at all. I don't recommend any at all because it only takes one to break something. But a lot of the OEMs, the Coyotes are famous for this. They run them on the knock sensor, so they have it so the knock sensor is working all the time and allows the exact amount of timing for the power to be maximized with whatever combination of detonation threshold the thing has, the load, the air intake, the temperature, all of that stuff. And so they run it on the knock sensor, and I guess that they rely on the sophistication of their knock sensor technology. The only thing I was concerned about for the truck, 250,000 miles, are bearings, but the truck has great oil pressure. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about that. I've never had one be bad from the wrecking yard, and I've gone through dozens of them. You also change the push rod length on any of your cam only techs, and do you see any problem winding up the stock push rods to 7,000? No, I don't. As long as it works with your head and camshaft. When we did the 7,700 RPM deal, the L33, we have comp push rods in it, but we had to have a different length in there, I think, because we put an aftermarket head on it. On my LQ9, the biggest issue with oil pressure was the pump pickup. you recommend in-canal exhaust valves for boosted LS applications? I've never put them in any of them that I've run. Using pump gas? No, not for a pump gas deal. If this was an all-out drag race thing, or something where you're running boost and elevated power for a long period of time, then I would say yeah. That's an item I would pop the pan for on any LS I've ever installed in anything. What, the O-ring? Do A62s have to be ported for the VTR truck Norris cam? No. Is a stall converter needed for 342s? The stall converter is not a function of the gear size. A converter, a higher stall converter than stock, will always help. A different gear than a 342 would also help, like 410s. I don't know if this is a truck or what it is. LM7 flat top piston, Trailblazer SS, and a Sonoma. Yeah, a different gear would help. A converter will help. None of it's required for that camshaft. An exhaust valve, yes, in canal if you're going to run a bunch of boost, yeah, or a bunch of time at boost, a bunch of exhaust temperature, but not for any street LS. How much horsepower will I get with max port and polish, and what's the most I can mill heads? RE 3-angle valve job with beehive springs, Gen 4 with truck Norris cam. What heads are you talking about? And then how much power are you trying to make? There are guys that can port stock heads that can go 320, 330. But if you have a stock 4.8, or you have a 4.8 or a 5.3 or a 6.0 or even a 6.2, you're not going to make a motor that's going to capable of making all the power that those heads will support anyways. I don't think. Most people don't. 99.9% of the people out there don't. Built a flat top 6-liter 706 heads 218 cam for my Z71 years ago, before truck Norris was a thing. About to go L96 heads and intake on it now. Kyle, I think that's probably a good torquey cam. A 218 single pattern with a 108 probably is going to work pretty well, I would think. LQ4 stock bottom end, gapped and freshened up, 823 heads, LS3 intake, sloppy stage 2 cam, Borg 475. But a 4-inch downpipe and full exhaust hurt anything on 10? No. What's on there now? And how big is the rest of the exhaust? Did you feel the earthquake today? I didn't. We got the notification on my phone. That scared the heck out of the dogs. They're like, hey, what's that? Because it was one of the few times, because I never have my ringer on my phone. And so I did. And when I did, we got this loud beeping, and the dogs were like, what the heck was that? And the dogs never alerted to an earthquake, which almost all dogs do that. In fact, they do it before the earthquake, because I think that they feel the very low frequency before people do. And then before the earthquake happens. And so, but they didn't do any of that. And the only thing that scared them was the buzzing on my phone. And I didn't feel it. And I've been through a lot of earthquakes, and usually I can feel them. So I don't know if it was too far away or just wasn't very big. Wallace Racing is my go-to for engine and performance calculators. So should I just change the rods in L8T before I boost it? It depends on how much you're boosting it. I'm just talking about, I don't think an L8T will go to, like a stock one, will go to where some of these other motors go, because the rod I think is the narrowest. I think I was looking at photos. Brian did a bunch of testing on one of those, but they changed all that stuff. But looking at the factory rod, I think it's smaller than all of the other LS and LT stuff. Trying to make compression, rebuilding an engine is annoying. Seems like in most cases you have losses and nothing that really gains. Thicker head gaskets, lower than stock compression. Have you ever reused LS head gaskets? All the time. I don't reuse a stock head gasket that came from the wrecking yard motors, like a real high mileage thing. I mean, I would on the dyno if I took the heads off to do something and then put them back on and we were just running it on the dyno. I wouldn't have a problem doing that. But I wouldn't do that and then go run it in a car. But I have reused head gaskets time and time again, like when we've done cylinder head testing. And so we do a head swap, get everything ready, run it on the motor, run it 3, 4, 5 times, whatever we have to do all the tuning and make sure that it's repeatable, and then take it off. Then when we take that head off, but we're putting new heads on. And so it doesn't score up the head gasket at all. That's one thing that the junkyard stuff does. When you take a head off of an LS, it's destroyed a lot of the gasket, in my opinion. What is the lobe height of the Lobuck truck? Are you asking what the lift is? But I've had the heads off my motor twice at this point. Same gaskets. Yeah, if you haven't run it, that would be fine. Like I said, I've done 10 sets of cylinder heads with the same head gaskets, and so it's not a problem. Scroll, man. What's the average total time in wide open throttle on an LS3 rec port head? I had 440 LS with ported LS3 heads detonate with 24 degrees and blew up on 91 octane. We've never heard anything anywhere near 24 degrees. Normally we would run 29 or 30 on 99% of the LS stuff. Sometimes the bigger chamber stuff wants more timing than that. And when we run carbureted stuff, it definitely wants more timing. Not so much because of the carburetor, but more because the MSD stuff that we're working. What do you think about an L8T? I think we just went over that, right? I think it's cool to have a bigger motor because it's always better to have a bigger motor. What cam would you recommend for a stock block LC9 with 799 heads and a VS Racing S480? So Brandon, are you trying to max out the turbo? Either one of the cams I sell or any of hundreds of other cams will allow you to max out that turbo. So that's not the question. The question is, what other things do you want from the cam? Do you want good boost response? Do you want chop? Do you want low speed power? Do you want stock converter? What do you want? What else are you looking for besides the big turbo? Because the big turbo will work with any camshaft. I heard your truck plus idle on a 6-liter and it sounded good. So on a smaller 5.3 or 4.8, the chop would be more pronounced. Yes, more than likely. I don't normally recommend that cam for daily driver 4.8s or 5.3s. We recommend the Lobuck truck for that stuff. Lots of fast stuff in Florida drag strip today. Have you gotten a chance to dyno the direct inject engines? I ran L83 stuff only. Team Righteous. Brian's correct in that, and he's not wrong very, very often. That's why those heads work so well, is because there's no fuel taking up space in the intake port. So relatively speaking, that head of the same dimension and flow rate actually flows more air because the fuel isn't taking up part of that. And C5 vet bought used 706 heads, BTR hot rod cam package came with thicker spring and roller lifters. Will be supercharging and a supercharger. Would I do anything with the 243 heads? You don't need to. You can run it that way as long as you have the correct springs on it. And I don't know what supercharger you're using, and I don't know how much power you're trying to make. Thank you for your time. Happy to help, Ralph. If I get too much compression detonation, I just throw a little grinder dust on the carburetor. Which is better for boost, the LY6 or the L92, and which should be better NA build? There is no better. Either one of them will work. The LY6 is the one that we made 1,500 plus horsepower with. So an iron block, we put completely different heads on it, but you can use those heads. I don't normally use I say that, but we did use factory 317 heads that were ported. Either one of those will work. And how much power are you trying to make? Sophistication of their software. An L92 is going to be bigger starting off. So for an NA build, you should start with a bigger one. I had to turn down my timing based on fuel and old Pontiac at 10.75. Stock LQ9. I just did 706 upgrade. Do I need a tune to run correctly? Yeah, you're going to have to take timing out of it more than likely. And you might have to add fuel. I guess the knock sensor coyote thing seems to work pretty well. Yeah, they, excuse me, they do. Those things run good. You guys in Chicago building max effort, ultra high compression LS3s trying to compete against old school super stock racers. It's the highest compression you run on pump gas street, and why? I wouldn't ever do that. That's not something that I would ever do. I wouldn't try to run the most compression on pump gas, because again, I don't want to go near that edge because there's little to no benefit there. Because once you start getting to the most compression, you get a piston design that I don't like, that has some kind of dome on it, which I don't like for flame travel. And then also you get near the edge of detonation, so you got to pull timing out of it. So any gain you got from compression, and now it's more problematic, you've had to take timing out of it. So I wouldn't ever do that. Knock sensor must connect different on Coyotes than an old GM1 because it comes loose, you're done. Well, the way that they lock a knock sensor in, it's not gonna, the plug on the knock sensor, I don't think that's gonna be an issue. 29 top, 35 second, then 40 and 15. What's the 40 and 15? What are those two things? Is that a top and bottom of the oil ring spacers? Well, 5.3 heads work on a 6.0. Yes, we run them all the time. Don't forget to hit the like button, Mr. Flimflam. Thank you very much. Z8 need 100 aviation gas. I don't know what all that is. Steve, the guy that got 140 CFM out of my G10 heads, gets 300s from cathedral heads. Yeah, that's certainly possible. Brian's done that. Lots of the total engine airflow stuff is like that. All this LS talk has me really thinking about LS swap my 67 Mustang. An all aluminum LS and a 67 Mustang would be pretty cool, though, right? Opening the top oil ring. Do they think that compression is getting down past the first ring and then down past the second ring and then down past the oil ring? A 6.2 with ported 243 and deck 30 with a centrifugal at 8 pounds. What can I expect? I don't know. I don't know enough about that motor. I don't know what blower it is. I don't know what camshaft it is. I don't know what intake manifold it is. Oh, Kyle's throwing shade at Lake. So the old saying, lean is mean and rich is, it rhymes with rich, is more true than ever. I don't know that that's true. Sounds to me like active exhaust headers, like active intake runners. It's the next thing in maximizing performance. Lean is not better. So we run stuff. I run stuff all the time, and I have lots of videos up on what happens when you go from 12 to 1 or 12.5 to 1 to 13 to 1. Or when you go 11.5 to 12 and from 9 to 10 and all of those steps. And in most cases, you get nothing. All you do is use less fuel, but there's no power gain. When you reuse head gaskets, do you spray with copper seal? I don't. We didn't at any of the head tests that I'm talking about. I have done that before when little parts of the sealing on the top and bottom sides of it are kind of beat up. We'll spray that on there. Otherwise, I don't do that. Is the lift figure with 1.7 rockers? If you're talking about my cams or LS cams, the factory rocker is a 1.7. Unless it's an LS7, then it's a 1.8. I'm reusing the 300,000 mile head gasket and bolts on my boosted LQ4. Have rescued them 3 times. That's good. Pulled an L50 now with my cousins. Are wanting to do a build. Do you think it'll be difficult with the flex fuel stuff? Are you going to maintain the flex fuel stuff? LQ4, stock bottom in, gapped and freshened up, 823 heads. LS3 intake, sloppy cam. Four-inch single with no muffler. I think you'll be fine with the 4-inch exhaust. I bought cheap Amazon head gaskets and they failed within 100 miles. Yeah, a head gasket wouldn't be something that I would go cheap on. Just like a wastegate. And also valve springs. Because I've tried some of the inexpensive valve springs, let's say. And we ran them and they seemed to measure okay because we measured them before we ran them and they seemed to be within spec. They varied a little bit, but they seemed to be within spec. Then we ran them and we kept running into sooner and sooner valve float. So we took 2 of them off and measured them again and the spring rates had gone away on them. I never reuse head gaskets if brought to temperature. Yeah, that's not an issue with an MLS head gasket that you've run 5 or 6 times. We have a 408 LS on E85 that's very happy with 20 degrees of timing at 23 PSI. Seems kind of high to me. I don't think that's high. That seems to be right where we would run it. But that's what the plugs check good at, and it's making good power. I don't know about your thoughts. I'm an LS3 416 stroker, summer racing assembly. 30 degrees of total timing. Yeah, that's right where we would put it. What heat wrench plug do you typically run for built NA high compression engines? The engine had TR55 plugs in it when it blew up. You didn't blow it up because of the spark plug. You blew it up because of something else, right? I would run something cold. We run cold stuff in all the motors. Just again, because it makes us feel better. We run a 7 or an 8 or a 9 in it. I mean, I've run those in just stock LS motors. What changed that aftermarket ignition systems have become less important than 20 years ago? Marketing? Well, a factory LS ignition system is way better than a points in a distributor or a point distributor or electronic distributor or a single coil ignition. They're already way better than that anyway. So any of those multi-coil deals are way better. You don't have to worry about rise time on the coil and stuff. And you got individual coils. We can adjust the dwell time on the factory ECU or on the ECU. And so you can have factory ignition systems that are good to 1500 horsepower. Car will be a fun street car. The one thing I can say about his ignition systems, they sold a lot of them. Adjusting the curve makes a big difference on distributors. Or a 7.6 headed 4H cheaper than 5.3 with the 7.6? No, all of those motors at the wrecking yards that I go to are the same price. Crawfish, what's going on? Chris, good day. What's the thickest head gasket that you've run on a high compression LS? What's too thick? If you're trying to bring the compression down and running really thick, I don't know that I've run anything more than a 53 or maybe a 60 on a Cometic. I don't think I've run anything thicker than that. I want 1,000 wheel horsepower, 408, 205 heads, all that's good. 10-1, 242 cam. Okay, all that's not, none of that's going to be a problem. $12.50 CFM Holly Super Sniper. Well, an S480 get me there. Yes, an S480, the right S480 will make 1,000 wheel horsepower. I don't know what transmission and rear end and tire size and all that you're going through, but an S480 is more than 1,000 horsepower flywheel turbo. It's probably like 1,200. Their max effort 14-1, 16-1 LSs. My old race shop showed me this past summer when I stopped by. Cool. Does anybody know if they sell an upgraded camshaft for a Chrysler 300 3.5 liter? LQ9 planning a turbo build, 706 or 79 increased compression too much. I'm worried about detonation. If you're doing a turbo one, I would just leave the heads on that you have. because with the heads on, with the 317 head and a turbo, you can make all the power that the turbo will supply. So I wouldn't worry about the head swap for that. They're leaving the LS all greasy and grimy, terrible aluminum oxide, 700 horsepower LS 5.3 NAs. That would be a lot. I'd like to see that. Not an LS, but some of the top fuel head gaskets are over 250 thick. They use a head gasket thickness to tune for track conditions. Kazi did a 300 thick head gasket because he was changing the displacement of the motor or the stroke length or something, and so he needed more deck thickness, but you couldn't change the deck thickness. So he said, okay, well, head gaskets are unlimited, right? They're like, yeah, you can put on whatever head gasket you want on it. And Kazi given the green light to a guy like Kazi, he's like, oh, okay, that's not a problem. Lean is better for a waste oil burner. Have you ever changed rockers for more lift out of cam on an LS? Yeah, we've put 172s and 1.8s on stuff. We've tested them. Getting excited about you getting to play with an Oldsmobile. That would be cool. Are there any identification marks on the Truck Plus cam? I don't think so. That would be a good idea, though. Just so later on there, because that always frustrates me. I don't know why I didn't do that. That always frustrates me that when I go to look at a camshaft 5 years from now or 10 years from now, and I'm like, what camshaft is this? Because it's not in the right box anymore. Have you seen any car combos run 12s and get 30 miles per gallon? That's easily possible. Will your low buck truck cam be a good cam for a daily driven LQ4? Yeah, it's. I would argue it's even better on a 6-liter. For towing with the 6-liter low buck truck cam, 706 heads, is converter good for this combo, or will it produce too much heat when towing heavy loads? I don't think a small converter like a 2500 or something, I don't think that's going to be a problem. But if you're just using it for towing and you're not racing it around, then maybe a converter is not necessary. Man, I just click one thing and it goes down. I have a 355 iron heads 10-to-1. Will it handle 7 or 8 pounds through a Vortec? Yes, it will. But you're going to have to take timing out of it. And are you going to do it as a blow through the carburetor? If you blow through the carburetor, that will work fairly well. Remember the side gap plugs? I have seen those. I think Brule's run side gap stuff at Westech too. I got asked that a lot after I did all those spark plug tests. '04 Chevy Silverado 5.3 truck Norris cam, 342 gear. I think a 410, depending on what your 20-inch tires. Okay, 20. They got to be bigger around than 20. Are the wheels 20s? You'll pay more for an aluminum motor. None of ours are more. If you find a motor in the wrecking yard and you're lucky enough to find an aluminum one, they're the same. Brent, what's going on? Yeah, I do live streams every day and sometimes twice a day. Setting up tune on turbo 408, shooting for 1500 horsepower. I think it will be possible on a chassis dyno with Pro Street tires. That's going to be a lot of tire. We're going to have to find a hub dyno. I think for 1500 horsepower and the torque that's associated with that, I think you might have traction issues. Retracted gap, not side gap. I'm using a 66 Cometic gasket. The pistons are 21 out of the hole. Rods wanted 40 worth of spacing. That seems like way out of the hole. How far down? How thick is the piston crown? What's the thickness down to the first ringland? What RPM does a stage 2 turbo cam run out of efficiency? That I don't think you would. Well, okay, a couple things. What size motor is it? What intake do you have on it? What cylinder head do you have on it? Do you have a rising boost curve? All of those things will matter. But there are guys running stage 2 turbo cams to more than 8,000 RPM. I have an LS453 230 cam Metalbrock Pro Flow. Would a 706 head pick up any over the stock 243s? No. Test looks like it would pick up a bit from compression. It picked up a little bit of power everywhere, but it's not enough where I would do a head swap on it. We should be paying attention to automotive manufacturers leaning out their performance engines, because in the not too distant future, lean will be everyone's goal as pump gas will be unaffordable. Yeah, I'll take a look at the. I know Lake really well, so I can talk to him about it. And Kevin, it wouldn't make any difference for me. It wouldn't make any difference what the video says, or I would have a lengthy discussion with Lake about it, because I love Lake, and I when we get together, it's like this nonstop talk thing. But it's not where I would look for power. It's one of the little tiny things, and of the tiny things, the oil ring is like the tiniest thing. So you could look for power with rings, ring seal and stuff, obviously very, very important. But the oil ring is not. I mean, you could talk about it and be one of those things you could talk about, like piston flipping and side gap plugs and things like that. But that's not where I would go looking for plugs, or not where I'd go looking for power. It's cool to listen to, but again, it's not something that I would recommend the guy go do, because he's gonna have so many other things where he can get power from. How much did 172s and 1.8 rockers help? It depends on what cam you're testing that on. Aaron was finally able to figure out my new 6.4 injectors for my 5.7 build are 44 pounds at 60 psi. Am I correct with your injector formula with 85? Will this support 500 under boost? Yeah, I don't have my calculator in front of me, but 44 times 16, and then let's say times 0.75. Should I keep my stock 241s? Going to be cam, intake nitrous, then go turbo later? Yeah, your 241s are fine. If your goal is turbo, leave the heads that you have on it. We picked up power from the 172 rockers on the 383 build that I did. And the 1.8s definitely picked up power, but they pick up more power. We tested on a stock cam on the 1.8s, because we did an LS7 cam, but we did an LS7 cam with a stock rocker because we tested it on a cathedral port application on a 5.3. And the LS7 cam on the LS7 motor would have been teamed with 1.8 rockers. So I'm like, well, we got to run it with 1.8 rockers, and you can't run a factory LS7 rocker on there. So we did what we thought was as close as we could get, and put 1.8 rockers, 1.8 aftermarket roller rockers on it. And they did pick up power. The problem is we immediately got into valve float with the rockers, which is something that happens every time. If you take the stock rocker off and put the aftermarket rocker on, unless you have a lot of spring rate, you'll get into valve float. All of my cam boxes are full of stock cams that got replaced. I have lots of that. What's the best turbo size to achieve 1,200 wheel horsepower on a Forge 5.3? Probably like an S480 or an S485. I mean, there are other expensive turbos, but those are the ones that I recommend that are low buck. On AFR 230 LS heads, they recommend a 4160 head gasket on a 6-liter. Why do they want such a big gasket on a 4-inch bore? Take a look and see and measure the inside diameter of their combustion chamber. A 230 head should be a 6-liter head and not a 6.2 head. But 4160 seems big to me, but measure that and see where a 4160 gasket goes on it. And you can lay it on the block and see, but lay it on the head and see. And you don't even have to have a head gasket. Just do a 4160 for your like your dial indicator, not dial indicator. What am I thinking? Caliper, your dial caliper, and then just see where it is. Hey, look, it overhangs about this much. You might not need to have that big a gasket. Maybe they're just trying to be overly safe. But 258 has split fires. I haven't heard those for a long time. Got them on the engine. They work fine, so I left them. Hey, if they're working, that's fine. You hit your passing gear, you're gone. Hit my passing gear, I'm gone right now. I love those commercials. My buddy Bernie and I, we talk about that all the time. Side gap spark plugs came from old Offenhausers. Maybe a stupid question. Can you stack head gaskets? I've seen it done. I haven't ever done it on an LS, but Dulcich did it on a Dodge test that he did because he wanted to find out the effect of compression ratio. So the way that he got the compression ratio was by stacking head gaskets. And so he went from like 8-to-1 to 12-to-1, which again, not ideal to do it that way, but other short of just changing a piston, which you get another variable in there. I salute him for doing that. I thought it was awesome. I thought, dude, that's genius. Just stack gaskets. And it worked fine because you have a thing where you're not making a ton of power anyway, and you don't have a bunch of cylinder pressure, and none of it's leaking out. So, you can do that. And if you look at Crawfish, if you look at a multi-layer steel gasket, an MLS gasket, that's what they've done. They've stacked a whole bunch of layers of stainless steel and made a head gasket out of it. And you can make that thicker and thicker and thicker too, because aftermarket will do thicker head gaskets, custom ones. Let's see. I have a Holly Sniper on the 355. Will that work as well as a carb? Yeah, if you're introducing the fuel into the intake manifold and you're blowing through that works fine. Did you hear about the drones flying over Jersey? I did not, but I am interested in that. Wheels are 245, tires on the Chevy Silverado. 410 gear, I would say. Any guys had experience running 906 Vortex with cracked water jackets to head bolts? I haven't run broken ones or cracked ones, or that I know of. They were junkyard marks, so we really didn't even check. I was looking for more 706 videos this morning. Watched the Bozeman testing the generator. Nice. Put the drill on the gear bolt and zap himself. Yeah, those are pretty sparky. The 317 or 799 heads work better with the low buck truck cam on an LQ4. The heads don't care about the camshaft. If you're asking which one of those two would make more power, a 799 will make more power because it has the same valve size and intake port and exhaust port as the 317 does and flows the same. It just has a better and smaller chamber and will make more power than the 317. But it has nothing to do with the camshaft. Richard, what's a good ring gap if you're running 1,300 horsepower? We run 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore. So you're going to be around 28 thousandths. LQ9 706 heads, truck Norris cam, truck intake. Is swapping the intake to the Trailblazer SS worth it? Not if you're looking for low speed power. The Trailblazer SS makes more than the truck one does, and it will make more on that combination, but not by a ton. What is your opinion on why Brian Tooley says cathedral port is superior to square port? I don't think he says that universally. In fact, I know that he doesn't say that universally. What head gaskets do I need to run 5.3 heads on a 6.0 LQ4? You just need stock head gaskets. They're all the same. The head gasket doesn't care about that cylinder head. Have you tied 1.7 rocker on the intake and 1.8 on the exhaust? I don't know why people want to mix and match that stuff. You should put the big rocker on both of them. You should have a sign with your website on a banner behind you. I didn't realize that the Lobot truck cam was yours and for sale until watching several episodes. I'm working on a banner that has BTR and AFR and Vortec and all those guys, and also my own channel too. What is your go-to 408 stroker setup? I don't really have one, but Scat has good stuff, and Racetech has good pistons. The Summit Pro LS stuff also is good. Excuse me. Did you do anything on Engine Masters? Yeah, I did a few episodes with them. We did the Big Bang 6-liter. I did, I don't know, 4 or 5 of them. Don't make me hit the VTEC. What's Freiberger going to do now? Freiberger is doing fine. His YouTube channel is killing it. That stacking style of construction is known as Sara Lee effect. Sara Lee does have good cheesecake. Have a completely stock LQ9 with 706 heads. What's the best tow cam? My low buck truck camshaft is the one that I would recommend for that. Although you're going to have fairly high static compression. You're going to be at 11-1. Would stock ring gaps on a 462 valve support a Pro Charger on a Mustang without concern? Probably not. Do you know what the stock ring gap is? Have you measured it? The drones are about the size of a car and stay up for hours. News said FBI is looking into it, but they think they already know. I've seen the military footage of those, like the Tic Tac kind of drones, those kinds of things. I've seen those have been out off of the East Coast and the West Coast for decades. That's been going on forever. We would swap out the rockers and see if it went slower with lower ratio. If no change, we keep the lower lift to keep the valve springs less. Yeah, if the lift is lower, it makes life easier on the spring. Just bought a 99 LQ4, has iron heads on it. They're essentially a 317 head, but they're an iron version. Building a 1-ton for towing. I myself wouldn't run iron heads. They work, and obviously they made them like that. But an aluminum head would be a way better choice, especially if you're towing, especially to hinder detonation. It'd be an interesting test to see if we could, to find out if those iron heads, how I want to see how they perform versus the 317 heads, but then also maybe like a detonation test to see what you could do there, to see if one of them detonated before the other. Will you be using Wallace Racing compression or displacement calculator in the future? 79% saying yes. I saw a photo of Kazi holding weird looking cylinder head with large brass inserts on it. He was lowering the deck height. Oh, so the inserts went into the cylinders then? Planning on building a 7-liter out of an LQ9. The truck Norris cam, either ported 317s or a rec port with a Whipple. Any tips on having as a daily pump gas? Yeah, that's a horrible idea. A 7-liter, you're going to make a 427 out of it? Not out of an LQ9 block. Unless, I take that back. I could be wrong. Are you sleeving the block? If you're sleeving the block, you can do that. Otherwise, you can't do that. Lynch. You can get the 317 heads, like the stock heads that were on the LQ4 Lynch Life, or 243 or 706. If you're doing towing, the 706 is a good choice, as we showed tonight. Pretty sure stock is 18 on a 2-valve. Well, the thing is that my point is that when you have a motor and you want it to work and you don't know what the gap is, you don't know if it will work because you don't know what it is. The brass drop the cylinder head onto the bore. Okay. When I build my 6-liter, I'll send you my iron heads a test, maybe for a while. I won't need them. Somebody was supposed to be sending me some and they never did. Richard, have you thought about doing a blower cam shootout? Didn't you already ask that question? In your opinion, what's better, an LS motor or Coyote motor? What's better for what? What are you trying to do with it? There's no universal better. And on that note, it's time to go. I've been here an hour and a half. Why are you guys keeping me so long? It's late. I got stuff to do. I got things to do, people to see. I don't know what I got to do. I got videos to do. But I will see you guys all tomorrow. Good show. Good show.